I'll just give you kind of my basics for hormone health in general. And these all come into play, whether it is PCOS or endometriosis or whatever.
Hi, Vivien. I'm so excited to have you on Staying Ageless.
Hello, it's good to chat with you again.
Yes, I'm really excited about this. One, because I feel like we have common things in common. Like I had acne issues, okay, that I overcame myself. And I also went through my own crazy healing journey before becoming a practitioner. And I feel like you did too. So I guess I want to know a little bit more about your health journey and then what led you to actually going to study clinical nutrition.
And all things have popped up along the way. So I'll give you kind of the condensed version. Otherwise, it would take the full 30 minutes to get through.
I know.
But I always said as a child, I was pretty healthy. But then looking back now that I know what I know, little symptoms here and there, like nosebleeds, car sickness, stomach aches, every now and again. Like I wasn't sick and I wasn't on a ton of medications, thank God. Like tons of people are on antibiotics. They're given like candy these days. I was on like maybe 2 to 3 rounds of antibiotics. So very minimal, pretty healthy diet. And it wasn't until I was about 17 that I'd left school and I'd gone from playing a lot of sports and being quite active at school to leaving and pretty much doing nothing at all. And I did feel a little bit self-conscious. I felt like I wasn't as fit or active as I used to be. So I joined the gym, which was like 5 minutes from my house. So I'd come home from college at that point and then go to the gym. And it actually made me feel better because I was moving my body, I was losing a little bit of weight, and I started to get a lot of compliments. And that really fueled the obsession with the gym. So it turned from like a couple of days a week, like an hour class, to pretty much every day, back-to-back classes. Oh, wow. I have a bit of an obsessive personality, so when I get interested in something, I'm good at something, I really go for it. And then, got pretty lean, like visible abs, felt great. Started to change my diet as well, not to support the weight loss, just cleaning up my diet. But I was quite significantly under eating, but not intentionally. I was just swapping everything to like low calorie, low carb, low fat versions, which are just even worse for your health in a lot of cases. And I lost my period. That was like the first symptom. And from that point, I had regular cycles from the age of 14, no issues at all. My skin had always been clear. And then I started to break out in cystic acne and my hair started falling out as well. I wasn't really concerned about the period loss. Like to me, that wasn't really a problem because being a teenage girl, you don't really know the benefits of a healthy menstrual cycle. But for me, it was the physical appearance things because I'd never had to deal with any of that. When all my friends were breaking out at school, I thought I'd gotten away with it. And then just as theirs was clearing up, then my like really bad skin and hair loss started. So I went to the doctor, was diagnosed with PCOS, which I know we're going to talk about today, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And my 2 options, they said, was to go on the pill, which would fix everything. It would bring my period back and it would clear up my skin and stop my hair from shedding. So obviously I jumped at that because the other alternative was to just wait and see what happens, they said, which if they wasn't going to give me any recommendations, they didn't once ask what I was eating, how stressed I was, what type of movement I was doing. Because I looked young and pretty healthy and I had no medical kind of history, they didn't really question me anymore. So I jumped at the chance to go on the pill, had a really bad reaction to the first one where all of my symptoms got 10 times worse. So then I swapped over to another common one called Yasmin and stayed on that for about 2 years. The symptoms did clear up. So my period, even though it wasn't a real period, now that I know, it's just a withdrawal bleed from the medication. So I was having a monthly bleed. My skin did clear up very well, but my hair stopped shedding. However, it never grew. Literally in 2 years, I think I had like 2 haircuts. I never had to shave my legs, which was a little bit odd. But again, just because my skin was clear, that's all that mattered, in my opinion. But then that was around the age of 19, 20. I started to get all of these other symptoms creeping in, like anxiety, food sensitivities, nutrient deficiencies that I'd never had before. And around the age of 19, I went to work in the US. I went to work in a summer camp in Pennsylvania as like a yoga and fitness instructor. And that was the summer that I got even more sick. So I got food poisoning twice, and just with the long hours of working out in like 100-degree heat, it was just very intense. And I'm still trying to eat healthily. But a kid's summer camp, I don't know if you've ever attended one or anyone listening, the food is pretty terrible. So it's hard to avoid pizza and pasta and all of that stuff. So I was pretty much fueling myself on oatmeal, salads, chicken for the whole summer, doing like 9 hours work a day. And then I got home, like pretty much crashed. Digestion was absolutely terrible, bloated, reacting to everything. I, at that point, went to see a nutritional therapist myself. I'd never really heard of one before. I just thought they were the same as dietitians, where it was just to help you lose weight or whatever. But she told me about the negative effects of the birth control pill and how they were probably suppressing my actual hormone imbalances. And then she did stool testing, found that I had parasites and bacterial overgrowths, yeast overgrowths. My thyroid was stressed. I had tons of deficiencies. Like all of these new terms came into my life. And then again, being the person that I am, I just go deep into the research, and it really inspired me to go and study myself, because at that point I wasn't getting any answers. When I suggest coming off the pill to my doctor, he would like just freak out and say that there's no alternatives and that I'm making a huge mistake and that there's a risk of pregnancy and all of that. So I thought that I would study just to learn more about the body, and ultimately healed myself from all of these things. But along the way, finding for myself, they're not something to jump straight into. But when symptoms are chronic, like they were with me, and coming off the pill and healing my gut didn't fix things fully until the past couple of years, and I'm 26 now for reference. For me, I think Lyme disease, which I contracted whilst I was in Pennsylvania and New York for that summer, from either a tick bite or a mosquito, and toxic mold exposure from my childhood home that I was living in that whole time. I think those things were the main stressors and causes of inflammation in my body, and all of the other things were just the straw that brought the camel's back. So my story was a little bit complex, and I think you said as well, you feel like you've dealt with every symptom out there, and you're like, okay, universe or whoever, like stop, I don't need any more education or experience, I'm good. But I safely say now, like over the past 10 years, I'm the healthiest that I've ever been. I've learned so much, and now this is why I help other people work through some of these things. And yeah, PCOS is a symptom of something deeper. So that was my initial diagnosis, but now I'm living PCOS free, and I totally believe that it's possible once you figure out what your unique triggers are, because it's no one size fits all like with any condition, but you can absolutely live without it as long as you keep the symptoms managed. You can't cure it, you can't change your genetics, but you can absolutely live free of the acne, hair loss, facial hair growth, and some of the other symptoms that come along.
Wow. I mean, that's epic. So you talked about your specific symptoms, and I've had clients with those specific symptoms, and you talked about the fact that there are different types of PCOS. Let's get into that part, because that's the part that has been so challenging as a practitioner. You know, I like to systemize things. I like to be like, this is how I approach this. I do it. It gives me an outcome. I get really excited. But with PCOS, I can't do that, I realized, because there's so many different types. Someone might present with more insulin resistance. I had someone present more with Hashimoto's type thing. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is a lot. So can you break down, I guess, the types that you've discovered? And we'll just start there. What are the types?
Yeah, in conventional medicine, they very much believe it's a insulin resistance, obesity, bad diet type of condition, which for me, if I was to follow the advice that they were giving for all PCOS, like a blanket statement, it would be to eat less food. I was already eating probably 1,200 calories, so that's not going to help. Do more exercise. I was working out. I couldn't work out anymore unless I wanted to be like an athlete, and eat lower carb. I was already doing that, and that would just stress my thyroid and make things worse in the long run. So that was the conventional approach. In more of the natural, holistic, functional world, I didn't coin these terms, but other practitioners like Dr. Lara Briden has categorized PCOS into 4 different categories, but you can be a part of all of them or just one. Like they can overlap. So the first one is insulin resistance. This is the most well-known one. around 60% of women with PCOS have some degree of insulin resistance. There's obviously people who are very obese, who are borderline or full-blown diabetic, type 2 diabetic, and they're very obviously insulin resistant. Like the blood glucose is through the roof, the fasting insulin is high, the HbA1c is elevated. They're the ones who doctors really kind of catch and they see in the practice, and they immediately can tell that it's PCOS. But you can still have insulin resistance and be lean. So this is where it gets a little bit confusing. I had some degree of insulin resistance as well, but it wasn't the main factor. And basically with insulin resistance, it's when the cells have lost the ability to process or use glucose correctly. It can be for a number of different reasons, like the cell membrane can be affected with the types of fats that you're eating. Particular nutrients are needed, like chromium, for that process to happen and the glucose to move from the bloodstream into the cell to give us energy. Sleep deprivation or insomnia can contribute to that as well. So it's not just about the carbs that you eat, but if you're eating a ton of refined, simple, processed carbs, then reducing that, regardless of which type of PCOS you have, or just for general health, is recommended, like cutting out the junk food. But most of the clients that I see are already coming to me eating really clean, healthy diets. So that just shows that it's not the food that's the issue. Other things can drive insulin resistance. Even having too many bad bacteria in the gut, some of these bacteria produce a toxin called LPS, and that can drive insulin resistance and metabolic disease as well. So that one is the most common. Other signs of insulin resistance might be that you crave sugar, you have kind of diabetes-like symptoms, excessive thirst, excessive urination, you can get skin tags, you could be overweight, you can just be carrying extra weight around the midsection. That tends to be a pattern. And sometimes like darkening patches of the skin. It's called acanthosis nigricans. They tend to be the most common ones, or like fatigue after eating a lot of carbs, or after you've had a big lunch, you're sleepy, you're tired. That could be a sign that your body isn't actually processing the glucose properly. So that would be the first one, insulin resistant type. Second one that I see commonly, but is not recognized well by conventional doctors, is an adrenal type PCOS, which is very much driven by stress. But when I say stress, that's not just mental and emotional. You have like an acronym, I can't remember what it is, but like chemical stress, emotional stress, physical stress, can be a ton of different things. So people say either that they don't acknowledge that they do have emotional stress and they hate the job and that is playing a role, or they actually don't. They're living a chill lifestyle and you say, how's your stress? And they say it's fine, but they have bacterial overgrowth, so they're eating foods that they're sensitive to, or they're drinking too much caffeine, they're exposed to toxic mercury or air pollution. That is a stress in itself. And that one can be characterized by elevated levels of DHEAS, which is an adrenal androgen. So that androgen specifically comes from the adrenal glands. So when it's high, we absolutely know it's stress driven. Whereas other androgens that can be high with PCOS, like testosterone, can come from things like fat tissue, the adrenals, or the ovaries. So they can be driven by a little bit of everything, stress or insulin resistance. So if the DHEAS is elevated, it's absolutely stress driven. Some other symptoms, if you think of any classic like adrenal or stress symptoms, so it would be feeling wired but tired, jaw and teeth clenching and grinding, insomnia, 3 to 4 p.m. slumps, just fatigue in general, tension in the body, racing thoughts. These are some of the other ones that you can experience. That would be adrenal type 2 PCOS. The third one would be post-pill PCOS. I think that I had a little bit of this as well, and a lot of women do. So I have so many women now, I work with some fertility clients as well, who come to me at age like 35. They've come off the pill at age 33. They've not had a period since, and all of a sudden they've been diagnosed with PCOS. And I asked them how their period was from age like 13 to 20 before they went on the pill, and they said absolutely perfect, like regular, no acne, no symptoms at all that could indicate PCOS. So that makes me suspicious that it's not a true PCOS state, because usually that manifests in teenage years, in puberty. Yeah. Whereas in their case, they're more likely dealing with a temporary hormone imbalance because of the different imbalances that the pill caused. Yeah. The pill actually makes all drivers of PCOS worse. It makes you more insulin resistant. It makes you more inflamed. it affects your thyroid, it depletes the very key nutrients you need for ovulation and blood sugar balance and optimal fertility. So going on the pill or being prescribed the pill for PCOS is one of the worst things, in my opinion. There's a time and a place for conventional medication. I'm not against it, but I wish people knew not just about the slight increased risk of breast cancer and blood clots, like many of us are told, but all of this other stuff, like there's a chance that your periods might not return for 2 years afterwards, or your fertility might be disrupted in the long run, or you might develop IBS and hair loss as a result of being on this medication. And then if someone chooses to accept that and look out for symptoms and just be aware, then I think that's how it should be. But with the pulse pill, the whole time that you're on the birth control pill or any hormonal contraceptives, your brain to ovary communication is pretty much shut down, and your own natural hormones are on flatline. You're just being run on synthetic hormones throughout the whole month. And if you go on the pill within just a few years of starting your period for the first time, let's say age 14, and you go on the pill at 15, your brain and ovaries haven't even had a good number of years to start really communicating and getting the ovulation on track. And it is normal for the first few years to be a little bit symptomatic and you're not ovulating during that time. That's normal. There's some science to say that it takes 7 years for that to really solidify that brain to ovary communication. So if you then go on the pill 2 years, 3 years in, you've halted, you've paused, you've pressed pause on that communication, so that when you stop the pill in your 30s, that has to then reconnect. And you also have to repair the damage that's been done from the pill as well. And the pills that people are put on, especially ones like I was on, like Yasmin, that are very good at clearing up acne because they literally shrink your oil glands and like really suppress your androgens. But because your androgens and your hormones are so suppressed whilst you're on it, as soon as you stop taking it, your body will start kicking out and spitting out a ton of excess hormones. So it goes in a bit of overdrive because it's been so shut down for that long. It starts going crazy and pumping out a ton of testosterone. So it's just like the body is trying to get used to it again. But then people get diagnosed with PCOS and then they get sent down, unfortunately, like fertility, IVF clinics and all of that, when it may not be needed. It could just be that you need to support the liver to clear out the excess hormones and restore the deficiencies and fix the guts, because the pill is believed to be kind of like a low-dose antibiotic. And some women are on it for a good 10, 20 years. I was only on it 2 years and it caused a hell of a lot of damage. But yeah, it can have antibiotic-like effects. So gut health is often depleted. And when your good bacteria is depleted, then yeast and other opportunistic parasites and things can take over. And that's how you can end up with more issues, not just the hormone imbalance. And then the final cause of PCOS tends to be more of like a inflammatory, that's known as like a hidden cause. And this is where thyroid issues can fall into. And things like toxic mold exposure and heavy metals and environmental toxins, endocrine disrupting chemicals. So I'll just touch on each of those. They're like the main ones. So with thyroid, a lot of the symptoms of PCOS can actually be driven by just the thyroid issue. And 25% of women with PCOS actually have a thyroid issue alongside. So not ovulating and having irregular cycles can just be because of a thyroid issue, as can skin issues like acne, hair loss, weight gain. So it's very important to double check and rule in or rule out a thyroid issue, because it's a whole separate, kind of similar things help, but sometimes you need a medication and you're not going to get better unless your thyroid is optimal. And making sure that a full thyroid panel is done, because most of them just do a TSH. That's not enough to assess a full thyroid function. So it would be TSH, free T4, free T3, and then the thyroid antibodies as well, because Hashimoto's is very common in women with PCOS. It's kind of a chicken or egg situation, but I believe that the thyroid issue tends to come first. So the metabolism needs to be addressed. And if it's not, then the sex hormones like estrogen or estrogen, progesterone, testosterone start to go out of whack. And yeah, thyroid issues often stem from the gut with things like H. pylori and parasites and this leaky gut intestinal permeability. Environmental toxins, so heavy metals, endocrine disruptors from plastics, parabens from skincare can enter the body and mimic estrogen in the system. So the body can either up or down regulate on natural production from that. And they are linked to things like infertility and immune system problems as well. But for me, I think the mold exposure just caused so much inflammation in my body. It made me insulin resistant. So it caused all of the main drivers of PCOS, which are insulin and blood sugar issues, inflammation, and chronic stress.
Wow.
The mold, the toxic air that I was breathing in on a daily basis was suppressing my brain. Parts of my brain were like on shutdown, so the brain wasn't sending my ovaries messages to ovulate. For the last year or so of living in my previous home, which was my childhood home, I wasn't ovulating, despite doing everything. I was like a hormone practitioner, and I'd been a nutritionist for a good number of years. I was doing literally everything, spending hundreds of pounds on supplements every month, doing seed cycling, managing my stress, everything, healed my gut 50 times, and it still wasn't working. And it was because the foundations of health, clean air, clean water, and clean food. I was doing the other two. I was filtering my water, I was eating organic, I was spending a ton of money on all of that stuff. But the air that I was breathing was toxic. That was suppressing my brain. It was telling my body that there was something dangerous in the environment, which can be, back in the day, us thinking that there's some sort of saber-toothed tiger trying to eat us and kill us. Same thing, it was just the air that I was breathing. So stress can be from many different sources, but it's not something to dive right into. I'd done everything before, but I know we're going to do a part 2 on mold exposure, because it's like a whole thing in itself. But for me, I feel like the mold illness either caused my PCOS or massively contributed. And now that the mold has been addressed, that's part of the reason that I'm symptom-free. And I've done other things along the way. But the last one of the inflammatory PCOS is very overlooked, but an important one that doctors would never recognize. If you were to go to them and talk about heavy metals and things like that, they would just have no idea, unfortunately, what you're talking about.
Right. So would you put gut inflammation in the inflammation category?
Yes, but it can also drive, it can also be part of the insulin resistant picture. And, all of them. It can cause adrenal stress. Having a parasite or a significant candida overgrowth can cause adrenal stress. It can cause issues with recovering from the birth control pill, and it can just be a huge stress in itself. So any hormonal symptom, whether it's just PMS or infertility or endometriosis or PCOS or acne, the gut needs to be addressed, and it's a significant factor for the majority of my clients.
Okay. So, I mean, you just gave us an entire textbook worth of understanding on PCOS, but when you earlier were talking about how Western medicine approaches it, it just sounds there's like such a lack of nuance considering all of those things you just talked about. So it's kind of like, I think you alluded to some of the things that you would be prescribed Western medicine side. Are there natural things that we can use then to address this, or even adjunct therapies that would be also helpful?
I do have, so the conventional treatment would be the birth control pill is kind of like the cure-all, quotes, from Western medicine, unfortunately, women's health.
Unfortunately.
And then other things like metformin might be used. Sometimes they prescribe metformin even without checking glucose levels or insulin.
Yikes.
And I have some people, and it's dropping their blood sugar way too low because they're lean, but doctors think, oh, you have PCOS, you must have insulin issues, when they don't. So just be mindful of that. Another drug called spironolactone can be used to manage androgen levels. And then for the other symptoms that can pop up, like acne, Roaccutane, birth control, antibiotic creams and things like that. So you can see how you just end up on like a million different things when the root causes just haven't been addressed. So I do have a blog post, and I can send you the link to this, on the medications, a little bit more about what they're doing and the kind of mechanism of action, and then natural alternatives. Definitely speak to your doctor and don't just go taking these ones. And again, there's a time and a place, and I've put some benefits of things like metformin because that's not the worst one in the world. There is actually some benefits behind it, but interestingly, a huge mechanism with metformin and how it improves PCOS, because it has been shown a lot of the time to improve ovulation rates and fertility and things, but the way that it's working is mainly on the gut bacteria. So why not just work on that naturally and not get the like gastrointestinal symptoms and B12 deficiencies that can come alongside. So I put some kind of nutrients like inositol has been studied, chromium can be good, zinc can help to ovulate and have good egg health and skin health. So that's a great blog post. But I'll just give you kind of my basics for hormone health in general. And these all come into play, whether it is PCOS or endometriosis or whatever. So movement is really important, but really Goldilocks with exercise. So not enough, then like working at a desk job and not moving your body isn't great because you're not getting kind of the lymphatic benefits, the blood flow. And you need exercise, particularly strength training I'm a fan of for PCOS, because building that muscle is going to help regulate blood sugar and insulin levels a lot better. It's going to improve your metabolic rate, your bone health in the future. So my 2 top tips for exercise is walking. That's very underrated, like 10,000 steps, like great. It's a suitable one for pretty much anyone and like whatever symptom that you're dealing with. Everyone can get out, especially if you go outside, you're getting extra benefits from vitamin D and fresh air. So walking and strength training are great. And even working with your menstrual cycle, if you have a regular menstrual cycle, so the week before and the week of your period, energy levels are naturally going to be a little bit lower. So using that time to kind of take it easier, have more rests if you're doing strength training, maybe limit your workouts to 30 minutes, whereas the rest of the cycle after your period and ovulation, you can push it a little bit harder and do more intense kind of sweaty workouts during that time. Cleaning up your environment, so filtering your water so that it's not got residues of antibiotics and birth control pills in there and toxic lead and all of these things. Fluoride is a big one, can be an acne trigger as well. And the products that you're using on your face, on your body, some of that can enter the bloodstream and again mimic estrogen levels and disrupt our hormone regulation. And that can take a while to kind of swap everything out. Like I don't expect people to completely overhaul their life and throw everything away and buy fresh, but next time you need a new moisturizer, choosing the more natural organic version. Same with deodorants, like what you're storing your food in, what you're using in terms of pots and pans. Are they non-stick and covered in Teflon, which is that can off-gas into the food and just be another stress into the system. But you can't be perfect. But that's why you have to clean up your home environment, because then if you then go out into the city or go out to eat at a restaurant, you can't control that. So we have to be kind of a little bit 80-20. But doing nothing is obviously not helping either. So doing what you can the majority of the time. Balancing your blood sugar is important for everyone, but particularly with PCOS. So you might not have insulin resistance, but you could still have blood sugar issues. So to me, that's eating a source of protein, carbohydrates and fats at every meal that you're eating, not doing crazy fasting or long periods of time without eating. Even like eating too often and snacking isn't great in my opinion either. I think we should get to more of like a 3 square meals a day type of approach, because then that allows your digestion to process the food between meals, lets your blood sugar and insulin come down to a healthy level before you then go in with the next meal. And key nutrients that I mentioned before would be things like zinc, vitamin A or vitamin A, vitamin D from the sun, really important just to like help your body function pretty much every single cell in the body. So they would be my top recommendations. Environment, sleep as well. We can't skip on sleep. Extremely important. You could be like eating the best diet in the world, but if you're not sleeping, then you're not going to be healing. And I have some clients, I actually tell them to have an extra hour in bed than wake up at 5 a.m. and go to the gym, because that's just kind of backfiring on them and not actually giving them the results that they want. They're just waking up, rushing straight out the door with a coffee, doing like an intense HIIT or spin class, and then they wonder why they're wired all morning and then they can't kind of get off the sofa at 3 p.m. because they've crashed at that point. So sleep, ideally between the hours of 10 and 6. For most people, obviously everyone's a little bit different with work schedules and things. But when the sun sets, we should be asleep. When the sun rises, we should be awake and eating at that time. Try not to eat too late. Give yourself like 3 hours before bed if you can. And limit screen times before bed. I personally wear like red, because I like to watch TV and things to wind down. Not anything too intense, but just putting on some red light glasses, like red lens glasses that block blue light, makes the biggest difference. for me. Not going on my phone and kind of having an evening routine that just calms me down and switches me off for the day means that I can get good sleep between the hours of 10 and 2. They're like the golden hours. They give us the most benefits because that's where our body is healing physically and detoxing, whereas the hours between 2 and 6 a.m. is when the body's healing psychologically. That's when we tend to dream, consolidate memories, process information. So that chunk of time is really important. But it's not just about how many hours you're sleeping, it's about the quality of the sleep as well. Because I have some people, they're in bed for 10 hours, but they're in this like surface level sleep the whole night and they still wake up tired. So I'd rather someone have 6 hours in bed, but like get to sleep, deep sleep the whole time and wake up refreshed than someone like tossing and turning all night. Because sometimes it's what you do in the daytime, like not getting enough sunlight in the morning, not eating breakfast, drinking caffeine past 2 p.m. Can affect your sleep in the evening. People don't think of that. So that would be my top things to focus on.
Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Okay, so I have to ask you one more question, which is with progesterone, what is happening with progesterone with most people who have PCOS?
So the issue, like chronically low progesterone, but why is that happening? It's because they're not ovulating. So it's a condition of chronic anovulation, so not ovulating. So the only way, little amounts are produced from the adrenal glands of progesterone, but the most progesterone comes once we ovulate. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. We can't ovulate unless we have progesterone, and it's kind of feeding into the next cycle as well. So it's getting that ball rolling and figuring out why the person's not ovulating in the first place. And it comes back to all of those things. So having too high levels of blood sugar and insulin, the body is going to be kind of confused. Or if it's got high levels of testosterone for other reasons like not sleeping, stress, then these things just get in the way of like a normal process. And the body thinks, right, this isn't right. My blood sugar's too high. My insulin's too high. I've got too many male hormones in the body. Let's not ovulate because the conditions aren't good this month. So then it's either delayed. Some women with PCOS do ovulate, but it's just very late into the cycle, like day 28, 25, 28. And then that delays the period. So the period's day 40 or longer. So that's why it's a condition with like very varying, mainly longer or absent cycles. And then for some women, like myself, because I was so inflamed and my body was so physically stressed and imbalanced, my body just did not ovulate at all. So I wasn't ovulating. Wow. I wasn't producing progesterone. But progesterone is the cure-all to pretty much all women's health issues, in my opinion, because it's anti-inflammatory, it's anti-anxiety, it helps to reduce PMS, it helps to regulate estrogen and other androgens like testosterone. So part of the reason that women with PCOS break out and have skin issues and mood issues and all of that is partly because of the fact that they're not producing progesterone. So some people just jump straight to a bioidentical, or they're like, I'll just take progesterone or herbs to boost progesterone like Vitex. And again, time and a place, but for me, the body should be able to make the hormone on its own, especially if you're under the age of 35. Levels do start to decline as you reach perimenopausal age, but if you're in your 20s, early 30s, and you're struggling with low progesterone, just taking Vitex or chaste berry or like the next like tincture from your practitioner, that can help to manage symptoms and give you some relief, but still work on these root causes. Otherwise, the issue is still there. And if that's left unaddressed, then you are at risk of developing other things. Because if you still have insulin resistance, you could develop metabolic disease and type 2 diabetes down the line. If your adrenals are still stressed out from something, your experience during menopause could be terrible, because that's really based on how healthy your adrenal glands are. If you're severely nutrient deficient and that's why you're not producing progesterone, then you're probably going to run into other health issues down the line and malnutrition from other aspects as well. So figure out why it's going on, but you can kind of band-aid short term if needed.
Yeah, no, love that. And it all makes sense to me too, because it's like, okay, progesterone is a precursor for cortisol. So then you see how the whole thing becomes this crazy cycle of like, if you're a stressed out person and then you have these, high androgens, whatever, the whole thing can just keep going like this unless you pinpoint what is the source of my woes, address that. And hopefully it sounds like mostly what it needs to be done is, and I'm the same way, because you can treat supplements like drugs, and if you're not careful. And so it's more of like, let's see how we can support this person's body to remember how to produce this hormone again.
Yeah,
right?
I fell into that trap even as a practitioner for myself. I got to a place where I could manage things. I'd have a regular cycle. My skin was pretty good, but I'd be on like 20 different supplements that cost me like £500 a month. I was like, this isn't normal. We're definitely going to need supplement support long term. I'm not going to lie, just because the food is so depleted these days and just with the toxic world. So you're probably going to need like 2 or 3 supplements on rotation just to stay healthy. But you shouldn't need to do what conventional doctors do, is just swapping a drug for a herb. That's still not naturopathic or holistic, in my opinion.
I agree. This has been amazing. Can you tell everybody where they can find you online, how they can work with you?
Of course. So my website is vivanaturalhealth.co.uk. So that's VIVA Natural Health. Same on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. My podcast is Hormones in Harmony, which you've been a guest on. I'm not sure if the episode has been released yet. So if it has, it will be on maybe summer or fall 2021, which was an amazing episode. We covered so many different things. And yeah, I'm hopefully be back for a part 2 to talk more about mold.
Yes, you will be back. Thank you so much.